Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So, a few days ago, I gave a webinar on how to incorporate a UI to your Dynamo workflows to run through Dynamo Player using the DataShapes package. And there was a workflow that I showed off that I hadn't gone through in previous webinars, and I kind of wanted to showcase that workflow and kind of talk about it and walk through it with you guys in Dynamo so you can see how it's built and start to incorporate that workflow into your own workflows. And so it was this workflow to place interior elevation views via selecting a room and placing it kind of at the center point or wherever the room location point is located. And so let me go ahead and run this workflow. So we see the UI pop up using the DataShapes package, and in the webinar I kind of covered how to create all of this information here, how to give the user the ability to select rooms or Revit elements in this particular case. And so we're going to select rooms, so I'll select on that button there and then just do a crossing window. Notice it's just getting rooms, so I got those rooms there. I'll hit finish here and then we'll hit approved. So as you can see, it placed the interior elevations there. Another thing that I added on to this workflow is it's going to extract the room name and number properties and apply it to the interior elevations view name. So as you can see here, this one is numbered 4 space dash space cafeteria 121, and it numbers it from 1 to 4, so 1 being on the left, 2 on the top, 3 on the right, and then finally 4 at the bottom. So I wanted to cover this workflow, and let's get into Dynamo and let's look at how it's done. All right, so here we are in Dynamo, and kind of just looking at the workflow here, you can kind of see that's not necessarily too intense. It's something that can be easily built. And let's kind of just start off with the UI. So we are using the DataShapes package here. The multiple input form ++ node is really the node that runs everything. And if we look at the set of options here, we have a description and it's looking for a string value. So I just have a code block here to provide that. A logo optional. You can use a file path and path to a image. Just be sure if you are passing this image or this workflow out that has a image associated to it, that's everybody's kind of path to that same directory. Otherwise, the logo won't show up. The button text here, typically it's set to set values. I kind of just give it my own sort of flair, some excitement to it. The inputs, this is where we start to build and see all of the information that goes into our multiple input form ++ that we see in the UI itself. The toggle, this is important. It always needs to be set to true. I should be putting out another video a little bit later kind of describing the series of if statements to run whenever you have multiple input form ++ or multiple UIs in your workflow, and if somebody cancels out or closes out of the first one, the second one won't run. So another video will follow soon after. Link to help optional. We can provide a link to a website that will appear in your UI. It'll be down at the bottom right. It'll say help. They'll click on that. It'll take them straight to whatever URL you take them to. Cancel button text optional. I feel like this should be something that is static, but there may be times where you don't want it enabled. And so I always give people the option to kind of cancel out of the workflow if they want. And then you can modify the max height, and then the actual width you can modify through there. Kind of backtracking a little bit, the node that allows users to select Revit elements is this select model elements data through DataShapes, and has an input name, button text, and then this one specifically a category filter, which is really awesome. That allows you to pick and choose if you want the users to select just a category without hiding everything else except for that category in the Revit file, you can use this category filter here. I'm just using the design script version for it here, just so that way I know it's always going to be rooms, because I know from time to time, whenever you go from different versions of Dynamo, that stuff can be added to the drop-down list of categories. I've seen that happen, I think from 1.3.4 to 2.0. It kind of messed up a couple of my workflows. So this is the method that I'm using here. So Revit.category.byname, and then the actual name of the category. And then there's an option here if you want the user to select a single element. Moving on, so we are getting the actual room itself. So from getting the room, we can actually get the center point of the room, which is where I want the actual elevation marker to be placed, and using two nodes out of the rhythm package. First one is the elevation marker. So this one just creates the circle for the elevation itself. It doesn't create the actual views. And so we use the center point of the rooms to place the elevation marker. You can use any sort of location, just make sure that it's a point. The scale factor, and so this is the scale factor that you wish to determine or wish to use for your views themselves, and so I use the scale factor of 96. And then the view family type, again, I'm using another node out of the rhythm package to pull just interior elevation views. If you want, you could potentially pull exterior elevations as well. So again, this node just creates the elevation marker itself and doesn't create the views. The next node here is actually creating those views. And so it needs to have an elevation marker, and so the two work hand in hand. The next one is the plan view, and this one is pretty awesome because I'm using just the active document or the view that you're currently in to create the interior elevation markers. You could have this to where it creates elevation markers on multiple views, and so rather than just this one, you can have it place it if, say, you need the same interior elevation marker placed not only on your level 1 floor plan, but also on a level 2 and a level 3, so on and so forth, or maybe a finished floor plan or something like that. If you wanted to be placed elsewhere, you can kind of have that. You can supply it with those additional plan views. The index, this is just going to determine how many views it creates, and so we can go as little as 1 elevation view, or the max would be 4. So again, we start with 0 in Dynamo, and so 0, 1, 2, 3, that's 4 instances there, so it's going to create all 4 elevation views. And so I changed the list level here at 1, and the reason I do that is so it's going to kind of chop this list, so that way each elevation marker kind of gets its own 0, 1, 2, 3. You can play around with that. You can see what it does when the listed level isn't at level 1. It's only going to create just 4 views for 1 elevation marker. And so there's multiple ways to skin a cat, and so there's multiple ways to kind of achieve this result. And you can kind of see the results that are listed here. And so it's going to go through the first one, so 0, and it's going to create 0 for the first 3 rooms that I selected, and then 2, 3, so on and kind of so forth. From there, I'm flattening the list a bit and just removing all of the additional indents in there and kind of getting into more of a structured list where each one is kind of its own. From there, I'm creating a dictionary, so I'm just swapping out the numbers from 1 through 4 and just applying a letter that's associated to it. And so we're getting the name of the actual, or actually the opposite, I'm getting the actual letter and then applying a number to it. So if you like the letter, no need to go through this section, but if you want to swap out the number or the letter for the number, you can use the dictionary to do that, which is kind of the easiest method that I found to do so. So we're getting the name of the element of the view itself, getting the length, and then removing characters out of it, so we just get the character at the end, so A's, B's, C's, and D's. From there, we're creating this dictionary. Again, a dictionary is a list of unsorted, or a collection of unsorted items that have a correlation between a key and a value. And so for this, my key is the letters A, B, C, D, and so wherever it sees an A, it's going to give me the value of 1. whenever it sees a B2, 3, sees 3, D is 4. And so we can kind of see that there. And so wherever it sees an A, it's going to give me the number 1. Wherever it sees a B2, so on and so forth. So we're using that to kind of create the name here. And I'm applying the number at the beginning and then building the room name and number after that. And so let's kind of backtrack a little bit again and just take a real quick look at how we're achieving the room name and number. So since we're originally grabbing rooms for users to select, we can use that information from those rooms. So the room name, room number, I'm using a custom node here. I didn't really intend to use the custom node here. There is an out-of-the-box node, so just make sure you use the out-of-the-box one if you don't want to include an additional package for users to install. And then from there, once I get the room name and number, I'm just combining it through a code block. So the room name plus a space slash a space, and then the actual room number from there. Flattening that list because it does include this indent, so just making the list a little bit easier to work with. And then adding that dash before the room location here. So then when I add it together, it'll apply. And then I'm using list at level 2. So rather than looking at the main list out here, it's nesting one more inside, and so it's working off of these. And so you can see it working here. So 0 is going to get the 1 instruction, 117 conference 116, and so forth there. After we've created the actual name that we're going to use and apply to the actual elevation itself, we just use a simple element.set parameter by name. Since we are working with nested lists, we have to use the appropriate nesting for the list at level here. I'm using at level 2 for my element and at level 2 for my value. If you want to know a little bit more about lists at level, I believe Keith Wilkinson has a lot of good information out there describing how to work with lists at level as well as list lacing, stuff like that. So if you're unfamiliar or want to know more about lists at level, list lacing, that sort of thing, the combination of the two, go check out Keith Wilkinson on LinkedIn or on Twitter. He has a lot of good information out there. So all in all, that's the workflow there. Pretty simple. Kind of what we're doing, we're just using the information of the room to kind of derive the name of our interior elevation as well as driving where the location of that elevation marker is going to go. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, keep dynamoing out there, keep automating, keep saving time, and have a good one.